you is that it is having an impact. You heard the legislation that Representative Hogan has talked about. On the police brutality front, the police reform front, there has been legislation now filed to license every single police officer in the state. There is legislation to ban the use of tear gas and rubber bullets by police officers. There is legislation to repeal the use of force standard that police officers are sometimes able to use and not be held accountable for their abuses. All of that legislation has been filed in the past 2 weeks. I also want to note that just on Thursday, legislation was filed to officially make Juneteenth an official state holiday. So to Representative Hogan's point, to Reverend Lawson's point, is to keep up the pressure. It's not just about protesting, but it's reaching out to your elected officials, reaching out to people in power. And it's important to highlight that what we're talking about here is not just ending police brutality, but really combating and ending systemic racism, and recognizing that is extraordinarily difficult. And I want to highlight a few areas at the state level, and perhaps a few areas at the local level, where you can take action to combat systemic racism. On the state level, whether it's voting rights, healthcare, housing, education, there are policies that would tremendously change the inequality that exists in Massachusetts right now. And I want to list some of those statistics to show how disturbing some of those interaction inequalities are in Massachusetts between black people and white people. In the city of Boston, wealth inequality. The median household wealth of an average white family in Boston is $257,000. The average median wealth of a black household in Boston is $8. Police stops. Even though black residents only make up 25% of the city of Boston's population, 70% of stops by police officers are African American. And the last is, when you look at the interaction, the segregation in Boston, and recognize that it happens in every single community as well. So from a voting rights perspective, recognize that there are barriers here in Massachusetts that we need to overcome, things like same-day election registration that will dramatically increase the likelihood that people of color can vote. When you're talking about education, this session, the legislature passed the Student Opportunity Act to dramatically increase state funding to make sure that no matter where you lived and no matter where you grow up, every single public school has the same amount of support to make sure everyone gets a great education. Housing policy, recognizing that the vast majority of communities in Metro West look the way they do because of zoning laws and housing laws that are intrinsically racist. And last, on healthcare, the COVID-19 pandemic has dramatically shown the race and ethnic health disparities we have in Massachusetts, where Latino Americans, Black Americans here in Massachusetts are COVID-19 positive 2 to 3 times more often than their population here in Massachusetts. That is unacceptable, and that's part of why I have filed Medicare for All legislation here in Massachusetts. But it's not just about state action, it's local action as well. And what I would ask you to think about, and I thought about a lot this week in interacting in my hometown with a number of black high school students of color at Acton-Boxford Regional High School, is why is it, whether you walk into Hudson Townhall or your public school, there are very few black faces? And how do we change that? How do we get municipal officials to change that? Perspective of housing. What are we doing, whether everyone here, your parents, longtime residents of Hudson, what are we doing to make sure we dramatically increase affordable housing to diversify the town of Hudson? And last, recognizing those microaggressions that unfortunately all too often many white people commit against black people. I heard story after story this week from active Oxford Regional High School students and graduates, again, my hometown, the school I went to, where they felt that police officers were following them, police officers were pulling over their parents far too often, that they get questions in high school about, oh, I didn't know that you would play tennis. I didn't know that you would be in AP class. I didn't know that you were black, you sound white. So these are all microaggressions we have to end that far too many black Americans are facing and are finally talking about in a very open manner. So thank you so much for having me. There's work to be done at the state level, and I hope you realize there is a commitment from the legislature to do that, but the local actions are just as important. So again, I want to thank all the high school students, particularly Maya, Ellie, and Ben for organizing this today. It's an honor to be here with you, and I hope this keeps going. Black Lives Matter.